Hi, everybody. Welcome to Journeys with Jack, the travel podcast with practical tips to enhance your trips. As you guessed, I'm Jack. So today I'm going to speak about Niagara Falls. What a cool place. So I had this idea to go there based on a conversation with a friend in my neighborhood who was telling me about a super cheap flight he took on a newish airline a few years ago to go camping in New Hampshire. The newish airline was Allegiant. So I said, well, all right, I'll check it out. And we looked around on it, and they had this one trip in the month of August up to Niagara Falls. So we snatched it up, and before long, my son Sam and I were seated in seats 5D and 5E on an Airbus 319 heading up to Niagara Falls. Now, Allegiant is a bargain airline. They are quite strict about things. You can take a small personal item, put under the seat. You get water on the flight, pay for anything else. And if you take a carry-on, you pay for that. Other luggage, you pay separately as well. So my son Sam and I put all of our belongings into one decent-sized carry-on bag, and we were only staying for a few days, so it worked out well. Before long, we were up there to Niagara Falls, New York, and we went to rent a car. Well, lo and behold, we stood in line for a good hour at the Alamo line, but it seemed to go rather quickly at the Hertz line. Now, here's a practical tip for you. When you get off the plane and you got your carry-on luggage, go straight away and get in the line at the rental car place. Don't stop for the restroom or to talk to people like we did. We'd run into some friends from our hometown on the airline and chit-chat with them for a while and lined up to go to dinner together later that night. Well, that gave us a bit of a delay. Nonetheless, we got going and we put in the GPS to head over to the Crown Plaza Hotel, which is where Marilyn Monroe had stayed when making the movie Niagara way back many years ago. Alas, the GPS is not always reliable. So we were coming to a bridge that you had to have a special pass, a Nexus pass, to get into Canada. So we had to turn around, go over to the Rainbow Bridge. So this is a very important tip for you. You want to cross with the Rainbow Bridge between the U.S. and Canada and Niagara Falls area unless you have a special pass, which is utilized typically by people that transit day in, day out for work. So eventually we got over there to the Crown Plaza, checked in, and we decided we'd walk down and take a view at the overlook and get an idea of the lay of the land. We walked past a veritable polyglot of tourists from everywhere. There were languages all over the place that I could hear. Some I didn't recognize, some I recognized from European travels and some travels to Asia, etc. Well, we went back, met our friends, ate at a sports-themed restaurant, and then we decided what we would do the next day. They were heading off to go see a baseball game in Toronto, and we decided we would try to get down and do a riverboat sightseeing cruise. So we went to bed, get up the next morning, went to a great breakfast at the Crown Plaza where they had fantastic waffles and we had some really good Canadian bacon. And the Ukrainian manager befriended my son Sam, and we wound up eating there every day of the trip. It was good fun. So based on the advice that we'd gotten from the hotel concierge and confirmed by the manager at the restaurant, we decided we should go early as opposed to later to try to do a sightseeing boat. We learned that the boats were much less crowded early on in the morning and got more so as the day went on. We decided to walk down and check it out. There are a couple of different boats in this area. Maid of the Mist, I believe, is probably the most famous, but I believe that leaves from the American side. We wound up going on hornblower cruises because as we walked up to inquire about reservation, etc., the steward told us we could pay and get on immediately since there were just two of us and not wait in a line. I thought that was a great deal, so on we went. It was fantastic. The boat went out towards the falls, and really Niagara Falls is three sets of falls. It's the American Falls, naturally on the American side, the Horseshoe Falls, and in between the Bridal Veil Falls. There's an island, Goat Island, over near Bridal Veil Falls as well. We had a good view of the falls from our room on the 12th floor of the Crown Plaza, so we knew which direction we were heading once the boat took off, and we went over towards Horseshoe Falls. Now, they give you a poncho to wear, which we duly put on, and lo and behold, we soon saw the need for it. There was spray everywhere. Sam and I had taken the precaution of wearing bathing suits and taking off our shirts and shoving them in our bathing suit pocket. Glad that we did, let me tell you. It was a great experience, beautiful view, but you're going to get wet. Far better to go like we did in August when it's warm. I'd hate to get wet and cold concurrently. Well, as we came back, we thought we'd inquire about taking a walk behind the falls. There's a great exhibit called Journey Behind the Falls, appropriately named, and we went up to inquire, but by this time of day, it was very crowded with our fellow tourists, so we asked if we could buy a ticket for a specific time the following day, and yes, you could. So we reserved for a 10:40 a.m. Sunday morning slot and resolved to go the next day. So as we were heading back towards the hotel, we stopped at the Nikola Tesla statue. Now, Nikola Tesla is a gentleman that was the first to develop alternating current. He and another gentleman named George Westinghouse were able to harness a great deal of the water power at the Niagara River and utilize it for electricity. Hence, that's how Nikola Tesla really became famous and put to work the discovery that he'd made. It's my understanding that he's the namesake for some type of automobile company, but we could check into that later, I suppose. Anyway, back at the hotel, Sam and I decided to get ready for dinner. By prior arrangement, we had our local yacht club contact via letter and email yacht clubs in the area near the Crown Plaza, and one of them offered reciprocity, the LaSalle Yacht Club, so we went over there to have dinner by prior arrangement. I had allotted about an hour to cross the Rainbow Bridge based on prior experience, but in what must be a world record, we made it across in 15 minutes. So we got over near the club rather early, and since we had some time, I told Sam we needed to modify on the fly, which people that travel a lot know that this is a common occurrence. Things sometimes develop a little differently than you may have planned out in your itinerary. So we went to New York's oldest state park, the Niagara Falls State Park of New York. It gave us great viewpoints of Horseshoe Falls. You get pretty close. There's some vertigo-inducing observation towers, or observation posts, I should say. They were quite interesting and gave me a good up-close view of the rapids and the falls, etc. We looked at Three Sisters Islands, Goat Island, Luna Island, I think, Terrapin Point. It was good, really good. Then the time came to go over to the yacht club. We were met enthusiastically. They were quite amazed that someone would come up to their yacht club from way down south, and we lucked out. It was lobster night. So we went out onto the back patio area where they had picnic tables set up, and we had lobster and clams and appropriate beverages while we looked out over the Niagara River. Each evening I'd noticed it got a little cool after the sun went down. I guess further north for me it was chilly, and so I bought this super cool jacket at the LaSalle Yacht Club. I'm leaning back so you can see the logo. Hopefully, let's see, point down like this. So hopefully y'all can see this jacket that was quite warm and is a great souvenir memento. So I like to doing things like that, is getting an article of clothing specifically from some type of establishment in the area where we visited. It makes for a good souvenir and brings back some good memories. Anyway, we finished dinner and it was still daylight because of daylight savings time, so we went back to the park and wandered around and looked some more and saw some black-tailed squirrels. I guess it's a black squirrel with a really black bushy tail, so that's indigenous to that area, kind of a local wildlife curiosity, I suppose. Well, back to the Crown Plaza, and we checked out the nearby Hard Rock Cafe and then went on to bed. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that we got in a bit of swimming at the vintage Crown Plaza, lovely tile work, old pool inside, and nearby, next door, well, I guess it's sort of connected to the hotel, nearby is a family-friendly water park, so we checked that one out too. So a lot of good family fun there. So we went on to bed. Next morning, Sunday, we got up, and by now the usual routine would be to go get the bacon and the waffles, talk to our Ukrainian manager friend, and so then we went on Sunday Fun Day over to the Journey Behind the Falls. Fascinating experience. Again, you got a poncho, and you needed it because there'd be openings in the wall of these tunnels that you took behind the waterfall, and you get plenty of spray on you. They had some fascinating historical displays, lots about people that were daredevils that would go over Niagara Falls in a barrel, etc. They had some of these displays at the hotel too. The one that I thought was particularly interesting about going over there in a barrel was somebody did it with a cat in the barrel. Could you imagine? I imagine the poor cat was beside itself. Anyway, talk about cruelty to animals. But we then noticed there was a fascinating display about a young man whose boat had gone over Niagara Falls in the year 1960. This fella was 7 years old and was wearing a life jacket, thank goodness, and survived the trip over the falls and was rescued by the aforementioned Maid of the Mist tourist boat. So he, to my knowledge, is the only person who has ever survived going over the waterfall outside of the protective barrel. Well, after taking that tour, we went back to the hotel, changed clothes, and decided we would drive down the Niagara Falls Parkway on the Canadian side. And boy, am I glad we did so. Our ultimate destination was the small town of Niagara-on-the-Lake, the lake being Lake Ontario. Along the way, we saw a bona fide barrel that was used in 1949 by a gentleman named Lloyd Hill in his trip over the falls. We also saw a floral clock, the massive statue to a War of 1812 hero, General Isaac Brock, Fort George, a War of 1812 era fort, which had an artillery display, fife and drum activity, musketry, etc. My son enjoyed that rather well. And all along the way, we were treated with vintage cars making their way down to Ontario-on-the-Lake for a car show. So we followed on, went down to the lovely, quaint little town with great Victorian architecture, checked out the Centigraph clock in the town square, which is a memorial to the veterans from World War I, World War II, and the Korean War, and then admired some really cool cars. That was great. So all that being done, we headed back to the hotel for a good night's rest, and then got up the next morning after having packed, and I looked out the window and decided when I thought the traffic had thinned out over the Rainbow Bridge, and away we went. We made it over in good fashion and had plenty of time to go back to New York's oldest state park, one more visit, and check out the great vantage points of Horseshoe Falls, American Falls, Bridal Veil Falls, etc. It was awesome. I neglected to mention that a neat thing that happened on Sunday night as we had been packing and preparing for bed, we looked out the window and there was a fireworks display and the falls were lit up by multicolored lights. Really a neat display. So check that out if you're there on a Sunday night. Well, as time came along, we finished up at the park and we turned in the car at the airport and headed home. So I'd like to make a couple of observations. This was a great trip. Very, very reasonably priced. We used a budget airline, which was quite pleasant, and it was very punctual, and it was just real straightforward. We had no frills, and we didn't really need any. And then renting the car, we learned you better not dilly-dally getting off the plane, better to get it straight away in the line. Now, another very important thing is don't always trust the GPS. I know there's a funny commercial that's made the rounds of somebody winding up in a lake, and the husband turns to the wife and says something to the effect of, well, the GPS said to go this way. Well, that's what happened with us in that bridge that required the Nexus Pass. So be aware if you're going over and you don't have such pass, use the Rainbow Bridge. But I'm also going to highly encourage you that if you visit Niagara Falls area, take the time to go down the Niagara Falls Parkway down to Ontario on the lake. You will be glad you did. Thanks for tuning in. Hope that I'll see you on the next visit. Have a great journey wherever you are traveling. Good evening.